So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaustubh, and first of all, thanks for joining this session. And today we are going to learn about integrating SDC with Storybook. So, in this section, we will learn a little bit. We already have discussed about SDC in past TECHX sessions, but in this session, we will just give an overview of the SDC and overview of a storybook, and then how to integrate them and use it. These are the table of contents. So we will look at what is SDC and Storybook. We will know why we want to even use them. It will compromise of the demo as well, and we will also look at some pros and cons, and at last conclusion. So firstly, what is SDC? Now, this is a hot topic now in Drupal frontend. So everyone might be familiar with it or might heard about the name. So SDC it directly stands for single directory components. I know the spelling is off, but I will fix it. So it's known as single directory components. And what's the use of the single directory component? It's mainly used for reusability of the components that is mainly used in other modern front-end frameworks. So we want to integrate our Drupal environment similar to what the modern frameworks or libraries or front-end libraries are capable of. So we are late to the party, but yeah, it's better than never. So this is a few things which is like advantageous in terms of what SDC provides. It's reusable, it's isolated because once you create a component, it doesn't have a lot of coupling with other components, but if you want, you can have it as well. So that's the facility it provides, and then it's also extendable, and it is swappable. Swappable in this case means when, let's say, I create a component and I want to maybe replace it with similar components, but might be few things might be changed. So in traditional Drupal systems, if we want to do something like that, we will look into examples, but that will be a very painful task to do, and a lot of redundancy as well. So there's a good article of one of the techie sessions, I think, written by Sagar and Malavya. So you can check that out in order to get the basics of the SDC things which Drupal have introduced. Moving forward, what is Storybook? Again, Storybook is also something which is on trend, and basically it's a front-end workshop which is used for building UI components and pages in isolation. And most of this are used for development, testing, and documentation of the components. So it's mainly used in the JS framework world mostly because in those frameworks we use components heavily, and we want to maybe document the components before we jump into the production code. So that's where mainly it was used, but now it is now also integrated with Drupal, which has been for a while. So it's not new thing, but it has improved a lot. So if you want to get started with Storybook, you can visit this link and get know about what is Storybook and how to do it, how to deal with it in other frameworks. Now, one disclaimer, the documentation regarding the Storybook version or Storybook package that we are going to use for Drupal, it's not that good as per what I found, but I think it will improve gradually. Now, why to use SDC with Storybook at the first place? So there are many instances, especially for front-end developers, we face like there is some new code base and we juggle through a lot of JS and CSS files and we don't know where they are. And we just need to figure things out. And also on top of that, we have task runners, maybe automation, and other things. So in those cases, it's very difficult for us to figure things out, and also where the template files are, because in some cases, if you see in Drupal, we use heavily preprocessors, so a lot of template files are manipulated. So in that case, it's very difficult initially for the developer to understand the code base. Now, yeah, so the same thing where the data comes and what are the data. It's very difficult initially to know about this. Now, what's the solution that SDC provides with Storybook is it introduces components just like modern frameworks, and it segregates the logic and rendering. So this means that the UI component that the front-end developers will build is explicitly is totally segregated from the backend logic which the backend developers will write. So that's good because there is not a good amount of coupling, so we can work independently as well. Now, how to do this integration? Now, before I go to the integration part, let me show you the initial setup that I did. Just a minute. This is the setup. So, in order to set up this project, I've used Docker, and I've used the latest image of Docker. And in Docker, I have created few volumes. If you're not familiar with Docker, maybe in the future I might take in TECHX. It is interesting, and mainly Land also uses Docker behind the scenes, so it's quite interesting. So this is the Docker configuration files that I've used, and uh, one important thing which is the export. So generally we export ports of the main container. So in this case Drupal, but here we are also exporting a 6006 port. This is mainly will use for the storybook, and this I haven't integrated with Lando, but what I've seen with Docker files, we can even deploy storybook on the server. So that is good. Now if I go to the main part of integration, so initially, as usual, there will be a subtheme. So this is my subtheme, which is TECHX. Let me zoom in. I hope you can see this. So this is the TECHX, and inside the info file, it's generally using the Olivero as subtheme, as base theme, and the basic thing of libraries and regions. Now, in this sub theme, we have few things which we need to install, like for uh, for integrating SAS. So I have integrated the auto prefixer, the gulp, dart SAS, and source map. It depends. Like this is just for the automation stuff. So this is my Gulf file. So the Gulf file mainly handles, I haven't added a lot of JS in this segment, but we can also add it. But this is mainly handles the SAS part. And this is the cleaning of the CSS parts and the traditional watch CSS and the building component CSS. Now, if I go to the main section, which is components. So as I told you that SDC requires, it contains your component in a single directory. That's why it's named as single directory component. So if you look at this image, formatted text, it houses the CSS, the SCSS, the twig, sorry, that stories and twig. I will come back in to this stories part, but mainly the twig, which is responsible for this component. And also there is something called a schema, which is required for the SDC, and it's mainly used for uh, discoverability of the components, because it is not like totally coupled with like the twig files. So if let's say I add some new key in the component and I don't add it in my twig, it will not bother. But there are ways we can restrict that, and we can add more restriction of like the keys that we specify in our twig files. So let me go through few of them first. So this is the so first thing first, in order to create a SDC component, you need to create a components directory, and there you can structure your code base as per your likings. I'm following the atomic structure here, but you can follow your own way. So in this example, we have few atoms and molecules, and layout. I haven't added any organisms here, but I didn't needed it, so maybe I will add it later. So this is the hero block. So this is an atom, and if I go to the component file first, so this is the SDC. This is the component.yaml file. Now this is the name, which is the component. The group you can specify. It is optional. It is mainly used. It is mainly will be used in cases where we want to discover this components in the Drupal UI part, but it's not used heavily in the Twix template. Status is stable. You can also add experimental if you want. And this is the important part, which is the props. So if you look at this structure, it is very similar to what we have in other modern frameworks, such as React or Vue or everything. So it requires you to pass on some props. And these props will be used in our main component. So we will, in this component hero block, we have an image source, we have an alt and an extra classes. So, and if you have noticed, there are few types of them. So this is string, and this is of type array, and this is also this is an array of string basically. So that's that. And so once you declare this, this is optional. So even if you don't write anything here and just add null, this will also work. The SDC will work out of the box. But it's good to have this component.yaml for backward compatibility and discoverability of the components. And also the integration with other add-ons such as the storybooks or any other libraries. So that's there. And in the template file, I have used those same variables that we declared as a props over the component.yaml file in the template file. So that's pretty much simple. And the CSS is just simple CSS file, and the CSS is compiled. So that's your simple SDC component, and it is same with all the other rest of the components that I've built. I haven't added any JS file in all the components, but we can add it as well. So it will be similar to what we have over here, like .css. It will be blog hero.js. Now, one cool thing about SDC is that this Twig file, right? It doesn't needs to explicitly mention the libraries. So library.yaml file, in order to tell, okay, this is the CSS file or this is the JS file, it automatically loads them behind the scenes. So that's very good because we don't need to add several libraries for all the components. So it automatically knows that, okay, these are the components, files, assets for the component. So once that out of the way, now this is like the code base, how you will structure your component. But in order to use these components, we need to enable few things in our Drupal installation. So let me just go to my, yeah. So in the Drupal site, you need to enable the SDC. So from 10.1 and above, SDC comes out of the box. So you just install your Drupal and the SDC is present. Just enable it and you have it. So that's once you enable this SDC, you will have that all the capabilities of SDC out of the box. Now, this is the code base. Now, once you do this, what you need to do is, let's say in this case, what I did is I created a content type of blogs, and I simply overridden few of the templates. Now, this is where SDC shines in terms of reusability. So if I look at this template file, so this is, okay, yeah. So this is my block, and this is my um, page title. So this is, okay, no, it's not this one. Where is the suggestions for node? So this is a suggestion, yeah. So if I zoom it a little bit, so these are the suggestions you are getting. I've just added one of the suggestions of node block full twig, so I'm using the full view mode. And here, if you see, there are few special icons. So these are SDC in work. So SDC is telling that, okay, this is a SDC component you are using. Now this is using the blocks page component, and uh, inside the component we are adding our template, and this is rendering all the variables which we declared. So if I look at the page, again, this is the YAML file, the component schema file for the SDC, and it has all the props which are required. In this case, I'm using the fields which I need to display on my full content page. So these are the things. And also there is something known as slots. Now slots are something which you might want to use if there are some independent HTML, so, and it is not related to something that you want to consume in your component specifically, so it's not directly related to the component, and it can be anything. So that's where slots come into play. And if I show you how I use the slots, so this is my blogs.page.twig, and here this is simply the this is the totally custom template. It's not like copied from any parent template. I will show you how we will use this particular template file from a written template. So this is the place where we will add our slots. So in this case, in this blocks page, I've just added something which we can add before the block or after the block. So these are the two things, and in between we have a few the main HTML which we want to show. Now that's I think if you look at the include statements over here, this is how we are adding our subcomponents. So these are the heading component, this is the summary component, and this is the blog hero component. So these are all atoms in terms of atomic design, and I've used it inside another component. So that's how you can reuse your components in other components. There are few keys or tags. So include is one of them, embed is one of them, and that's how you extend the templates. So that's pretty much the SDC part of the play. And if we look at the, just a minute, let me show you one of the atoms as well. So that heading part, so this is the heading. I'm passing the prop of text, and with the dynamic value I'm receiving, so block title. Now this block title is supplied from the main overridden template. So in this case, our node blocks, and this is where I'm using the embed, and I'm adding that blocks page component and passing all the things which I need for that specific component. So in this case, I need all the block title, which is like keyed with the map value which I'm getting from the main template, node body or field hero image with the file. So all these things. Now, in embed case, why I have used embed and not include? Because I also want to pass on the props which will be added in the main template. So in this template, the slots part. So this is the slots part. So it will comprise of this simple text. You can add even complex elements in here as well, or even some other variables, template variables that you have. Maybe you don't want it inside your main component, but maybe you want to use it somewhere else. So you can use slots for that. So so that's how it looks in the front end. So this is how it looks. Now after once this is like done, so this is the SDC part. We want to integrate stories. Now once the SDC is integrated in the new version of the storybook, what we need to do is, firstly we need to install a package. So we are moving to the next step of the process. So we need to install Drupal Storybook version 1. It is in beta state, but this is very new. So, but it's kind of work for 10.1 and above. So we can install. We need to install this module, and after that we need to go to the development or services.yml file, and we need to add few parameters there. So what are the parameters? So the parameters are, if I go to the so so this, if it looks scary, it's something that we can just copy paste from the documentation page. So it only disabling the Twig cache and enabling the storybook in development mode. So it requires us to enable the core setting, and this is important because the way the new storybook works is by communicating with Drupal via HTTP. So using fetch commands, uh, it actually communicates with the Drupal and renders the stories. So it's not how traditional Storybook works. So mainly Storybook was created for the modern the JS frameworks. So out of the box, it's not supported by Drupal, but this is like custom made by uh, few of the developers. So moving forward, so once you, in order to look at what I have added, if you want to check from where we can add this, we can simply go to Drupal Storybook, and this is the first link, and we can simply, if we scroll down, this is the part where we can copy it from, and this also like explains why we want to use this. So once that is done, we want to enable we want to add our permissions to anonymous user in order to access the storybook. Now why this is important is because since the storybook is communicated with Drupal via the cores, it the anonymous user, the storybook session is in an anonymous session, and the Drupal that you are using, it's also using the anonymous session, because in terms of local development, it cannot communicate with authentication. Right now, I don't think there is a way we can authenticate the user and then show the storybook, but this is how it is as of now. So that's why you can run this command in order to, oops, sorry. So you can run this command in order to add this render storybook stories permission to an anonymous user. And if you're not comfortable with rush commands, you can also you can also do it via the UI. So simply go to the people and permissions, and there just search for storybook, oh, storybook, and this is the permission, and you want to give it access to the anonymous user. Now mind it, this is not, of course, safe. It's only applicable for local development, and that's what is also written in the documentation. So okay, that's done. After you add the permission, why it just automatically scrolls? Okay. Configuring storybook. So now once you add the permission, you can configure the main storybook section. So you have installed the storybook package, and now we want to set few things. So this is like they're using Yarn, and this is the latest version of Yarn. And then we are linking our node modules in the Yarn RC files. So linking the node modules in the Yarn RC. And then we are installing this is the main command. So yarn dlx sb init build a webpack 5 type server. So in normal, like in React, if you use Storybook, it will be simply sb init. The version that Drupal uses is the server version, because server, in the sense, the module actually uses server in order to communicate to the Drupal. So that's why this is the important command. This is the package that you want to install. Now this everything is present in the official documentation of the project, so you can go through it and also do it. Once that's out of the way, we can start with the stories. And in order to create the stories, this is the Twig file that you want to create. So stories.twig. Now, if I go to my components, the SDC components, you will see that in the component section, I have few uh, stories.twig files. Now, this was not possible in the previous versions of Storybook or the previous modules that was applicable, and it is because Storybook doesn't understand twig files out of the box, and we want it to compile. We want it to compile to a JSON file, and that JSON file is this one, and this is what is understood by the Storybook. Now, this is important because if you look at the file, there is server IDs which is present. Now, there is a gotcha in case of setup, if you are doing it via Docker, is that the server ID. So if I just go to this section, I know it's clumsy, but there is something called URL, server URL. So this is the main domain which we are communicating with in order to handle the storybooks. So if you want to integrate Storybook by the Docker file, you want to add alias to the Docker file. Otherwise, the alias, if you don't add the alias, this will be default. So that will not work, and your Storybook will not work. And that's one of the reasons why Storybook doesn't work in some of the installations. So check this section, this stories.json file, that this domain matches your Drupal site or not. Otherwise, the stories will not work. So that's out of the way. Now, if we look at the main stories.twig file, which is wonderful because now we can actually use Twig in order to create our stories, and we do not need to add everything like in JSON format like this, and it will be compiled. So it is very simple because in this storybooks we use special tags. This tags are stories, and this mentions that okay, the entire thing is a stories, and it has a title of component atom blog. I will show you the UI how and where this thing reflects, but this is the code base for that, and this is our default story. Now we can have several stories. So for example, if I look at my headings and if I go to the stories section, uh, this this has some advanced controls. So this is using the select control. So if you're not familiar with Storybook controls or archetypes or args, uh, there is, I think there was one of the sessions by Subramaniam, I'm not sure, but it can give you a revision of all the things which is like present in Storybook. So so this actually uses this archetypes of control, and it helps us to select all this option of tags. Now, this is the default Storybook again, and it is using the SDC component headings with the tag and text. And this is another story which is heading 1, and this is another story heading 2, and so on and so forth. So that's how you create a stories in the Twig template. Now, once you create the stories, what you need to do is you need to run a command which comes out of the box once you install the Storybook package, and that is generate all stories. Now, this command is useful if you want to compile all the stories into the JSON file. So once you run this command, the stories get compiled into the JSON file, and you got the JSON file now. Now there is another command which is just like, I haven't added it, but it's just drush storybook generate stories and story, and then the name of the file path of the story. So it actually specifically will compile that story. There is also a handy command which comes out of the box for Linux users, which is watch, and it will watch all the stories and it will compile it. And if you are on Mac, you have to install watch via the brew. So that's how you will do it. Now let me show you let me give you the demo for the storybook. So I am in my Drupal site. Now here, if you look, I have yarn lock, and I have my node, my package JSON, so that's where the stories books are present. And in order to run the storybook, I just simply add this thing. So before that, as I told you that we need to compile the stories. So, okay, so we just can write it. Storybook generate all stories. I hope this is fine. Yeah. So now it's skipping, but it will actually say you that it's generating the file because I've already compiled it. That's why. So if you see, this is actually compiling those Twig file into the JSON files, and that's how you get those JSON files. And once you do this, you simply run the yarn storybook command, and this will open your storybook in port 6060. And that was a caveat I was speaking about in the Docker file, because if you don't export your 6060 port, then you won't be able to access your storybook locally, or if it's like hosted in server or something. So once that is there, we have our storybook. Let's open it. So this is our storybook. Let me refresh it. Showing, yeah. Okay. So if this is first time you are seeing Storybook, I just giving you an overview of things. This is the dashboard of all the components which are present. So don't if you look at this, this is the by default examples which comes by the Storybook package, and the dock doesn't works out of the box, unfortunately, for the server version of the Storybook. So in order to create dock files, you need to add .mdx files. So if you want to know about docking with Storybook, mdx Storybook is a good way to write it. So this is a standard way of writing documentation for Storybook, and that's how you will write your Storybook documentations. It uses like similar syntax as JS, but it is MDX. Now, so I was in the demo. So here is the examples which comes out of the box. We don't want to focus on that. This is the part where the SDC's component are rendered. So so this is the atoms, this is the molecules. So if you look at this, this is the section where all the stories will come in orderly fashion, and you have few controls and actions. Visual test is something which we need to buy, but these two things are present out of the box. Controls are a way in order to interact with the variables of your stories. So in this case, if I want, I can change the alt tag of the hero banner image. So something image, but let me show you something better. So in this case, this is a formatted text, and this it actually sanitizes the tags, and if it does contain some script tags, it will sanitize this. So you can play around uh, with the variables and can test it. So this is very useful for the QA testers because they don't need to manually go to a website and then test it. Now there are also so this is some advanced some basic controls which comes out of the box by the Storybook. So this is a select box, so you can choose what sort of heading you want to have, and it will reflect it instantaneously. So, and even you can change it the data, so long data and everything, it will auto reload that uh, component. So that's how you create the storybooks. And once so this is great for testing purposes, and also great for great for like creating components before before the backend developers like add all the backend stuff. So we can create the components and we can use it in our templates, as we saw from the demo. Now, so that's what about the storybook stuff. Now, why we want to, what are the pros and why we want to choose the new way of Storybook in the first place? So this is because the CL server version, which was the previous version, which was very popular and was created by the Lunabot team. And this is the upgraded version of the CL server. And CL server, its full form means is component. component server. So that's the component server is the full form of this components. So this is also present, but this is depreciated, this package. Now we only use this storybook, the new storybook for Drupal 10 and above. And the main advantage for using this storybook, a new way of using this storybook, is because we don't need to work with YAML or JSON files. We simply can write the Twig templates and we will have our stories. Previously, we need to add like stories in like YAMLs or JSON. Now, it was a bit tricky for complicated like complicated structures. So in that case, Twig is very helpful. We can take advantage of all the Twig stuffs. Now, compatibility is easy for templating, of course, because it is Twig and not JSON or YAML files, and it uses this Server 5 package. So Server Webpack 5 package is the package which this storybook uses in order to communicate with Drupal. Um, Now, all is good now, but there are few disadvantages as well. So one of them is it might be slow in some systems um, because it communicates with your Drupal system continuously, so it might hang your system in some system. Now, not all add-ons are supported and work properly. So in the traditional storybook, we have few extra additional stuff which we can integrate with our storybook, such as decorators, and there are a few other things. But it doesn't work properly with this version of the storybook. So that's something I think Lunabot is working on, and it can become complicated if we're dealing with like multi-nested embeds, because when your component increases and your embed increases, it might get a bit confusing in order to track the components. So these are few of the cons which I believe it have. Now, why we are going with SDC and Storybook? So it unlocks a new dimension for front-end developers because firstly, it creates an agnostic components and we can use them anywhere. So for example, I haven't added an example of it, but what I can see is once we create any atomic components, we can even integrate some React components in our custom modules, and we can create custom blocks out of it via the YAML files that we write over here. So I think there was a documentation, I couldn't find it out on, but there is a good documentation of the advantages of SDC uh, uh, in order to work with like the front end stuff. Now, it also enables the component visibility via the Drupal UI. So there are few modules such as uh, the SDC blocks, which is great because now what we can do is we can simply write our components, and these components will show as blocks in our Drupal site. So it is great because we can now use this in order to create custom blocks, and we don't need to create the old way of adding custom blocks via the UI and then having the configuration pile up. So this is good way of writing the blocks now. And also this there is another module which is like layout builder. Now this is not stable yet, but the layout builder stuff will be accessible as well. So in upcoming releases, there will be ability to add components via the layout builder API. So we can add all the components via the layout builder as well. So this is not yet stable, but it's in work in progress. So that was a small presentation regarding integration of SDC with Storybook. Hope you like it, and if you have any question, feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you for watching. I had an amazing time learning all the new things here at Specbee's TECHX. And if you did too, do let us know in the comments below. Keep following Specbee for the latest trends in technology. See you in the next one.